Okay, so this will be a short series. It'll be video, but only because I don't have that many photos to be displaying here and showing you while I tell the stories. But this will be fishing stories from Salty101.com. You can see the link in the description. So I have maybe about 6 stories. This will be the first one. This one is it's called Fishing Stories. I'm going to read the article, right? So I'm just going to read it to you. That way, if you're in the car or something and you want to hear a fishing story, you can just listen. Ready? First one is 40+ inch snook on a 2-pound test line and Sabiki rig. Okay, so this happened with my uncle. This was many years ago. This was when I was living in Tampa, Florida, and I lived on a saltwater canal. So I was able to throw my kayak right off the dock, right? And hit the canal, and then I could just drift down into Tampa Bay and then come back when the tide was coming in. So I used to do this so often. I had a job where I didn't necessarily have to go to work, so I would work online. So I would fish a lot. And so this happened one time. They visited me from Pennsylvania. That's where I grew up. And my cousin Mark, he was about 20 at the time. And my uncle, who was about 50, I guess, at the time. And they brought the Winnebago down, the huge Winnebago. Anyway, that's enough backstory. Okay, I'm going to read it. This is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen happen on the water in my life. But I'm so glad I was there to witness it because I'd have never believed it. My Uncle Jim was always a contrarian. He did things differently. He was his own man. He was an accomplished artist with oils, watercolor, and even sculpture. He was a hunter and a fisherman. He was a teacher at universities. He especially liked teaching art in Sarasota, Florida, because he could drive his big Winnebago camper down with his wife, and they spent the entire summer there taking life easy. Uncle Jim never had caught a snook. Far as I know, he never even targeted one. He loved bass and trout fishing, and he took me and taught me from a young age. I'll be forever indebted to him for showing me the best side of nature, whether it was from a camper, a trail, or a canoe. On this occasion, he was at my home in Florida. I had an apartment at a complex with a saltwater canal and a huge dock. He and his son came down for a couple of days, and they stopped by one sunny afternoon to chat and sit on the dock with me. We sat there and talked for a while before he went and got his fishing rod. When he brought it back, I couldn't help but chuckle and ask him what he thought he was going to catch with a hook the size of a Sabiki rig, like the kind used to catch small pinfish to use as bait. He smiled knowingly and sat down in his recliner on the dock and went about packing a small bit of shrimp. I mean a fraction of a shrimp onto his ultra tiny hook. He didn't even cast it. He just let it drop off the rod tip straight down into the murky depths, pulling offline with his hand to let it sink and float with the current. It was high tide and the water was about 6 feet deep in this spot. We kept up the chatting and I saw him cranking his reel a bit to reel in some line. I didn't notice he had a fish on, and he sure didn't say something about it either. At some point he let me know he had something on. He was in absolutely no hurry about reeling it in, and I figured he caught a pinfish or even a smaller baitfish. He reeled and talked. It wasn't long before he said he got sight of it in the water. I thought I saw the flash of a side of a fish too. It wasn't a big fish, but looked like it was maybe about a foot long or so. I was already impressed as hell. In another few seconds, I saw another flash, this one 40+ inches long, easy. I screamed, and Uncle Jim just smiled. I couldn't believe it. And I thought that big fish was probably just passing by, not hooked. He'd caught a bait fish, and this big fish was probably thinking about eating it. That had to be what was going on. In another few minutes of reeling, he brought this absolutely massive snook to the topwater where we could see it. I couldn't breathe. It was that damn big. I'm guessing it was 45 inches or so, but I had never seen a 45-inch snook. so I don't know for sure. I had seen 36-inch fish before, and this snook dwarfed that size fish. It was an absolute monster. I chose the image at the top of this webpage because that was about half as big as the snook my uncle caught. I got really excited while Uncle Jim just slowly reeled as the fish took drag, all 2 pounds of drag, and considered what to do. I had a net, but it was about 60 yards away in the apartment. I couldn't miss this fish. I dared not go anywhere. I told him to bring it back up to the top and I would grab it from the dock. That was the plan anyway. In 5 minutes, the giant snook was right in front of us, just an inch of water covering its dorsal area. It was too good to be true. It was a personal record fish for him for sure. And I saw that he was starting to get a little bit excited himself. He still kept his composure though. He was about 50 or 60 and had seen a lot during his life. This fish was shockingly big, but he wasn't letting it affect him. He was calm and composed. I, on the other hand, was a basket case. I thought I had about a 4% chance of grabbing that snook and pulling it out of the water. Still, that was good enough that I had to try. I snuck up to the edge of the dock and looked over. The fish was glorious, this picture-perfect specimen. It was strong and thick. It was maybe a big female. I second-guessed myself. I thought about the sharp gill plates. I knew I was going to cut myself if I was actually able to grab it. Then I really didn't care, but it added to the stress of the situation. I began to slowly reach down to grab it, and at some point, the snook spooked and dove very fast, stripping out 20 yards of line in a second, and I heard that horrible sound. Snap! The tiny line had snapped. And that's the end of the biggest snook I've ever seen story. My uncle wasn't all that disappointed. He saw the fish. He admired it. He'd caught it. It virtually landed it. Had I had a net, he'd have landed it. And it was a moment of time. It was a moment in time that I'll never forget. We were certainly blessed that day, maybe like never before. I sometimes wonder if that would have stood as a snook record on lightweight gear. At least in our minds it would have. The moral of the story, I think, is that it's not necessary to muscle a fish in all the time. That snook probably didn't even know it was hooked for the longest time because my uncle so cautiously reeled it in, delicately, finessing it closer and closer to the dock without any aggression or control at all. It was really something to witness. I hope you also get to see something like this someday. Now my Uncle Jim is in his 80s, and I'm hoping we get at least a couple more days on the water before he checks out. Do you know somebody that's older and possibly going to go at any time? Why not offer to take him or her fishing again? It doesn't take much to stand and hold a rod. Anybody can do it. Why not do that if you can find the time this weekend? Okay, so that's that. And then I have more fishing stories. Here are some of the other ones. You can check out the channel in the playlist that this one is in. And here's some of the titles. How I Almost Killed My Girlfriend While Wade Fishing. That's one. My Brother Almost Dies on First Day of Trout Season. Another one. That Time I Accidentally Set Fire to My Foot. And then in parentheses, I had a stingray barb in my foot. Another one. Dave's First Fishing Trip Ever. Another one. I take my little brother fishing and nearly kill him. Death seems to be a topic here. Spearfishing for giant trevally bait. This was in Maui. And spearfishing on Maui, I almost died. So those couple, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stories. So if you like this one, you're definitely going to like the I Almost Killed My Girlfriend. You should definitely listen to that one. All right, cheers.